So this week's chapter ended up confusing a lot of people because the ending contained a reference so specific to Japanese culture that anyone who wasn't familiar with Japanese culture probably didn't get it. So this is something I've been thinking about for a little while, but I wanted to make a type of video that covered all the different Japanese references and use of Japanese words that may not be easily understandable by those who are not familiar with Japanese culture. I'm not sure if I'm going to be making this as just a one-off video or it is something that I might do as a series and I might bring back for future chapters, but either way I just wanted to cover the things in this chapter that you might have missed out on if you do not have any knowledge about Japanese culture or how the Japanese language works. So the first reference comes in the fact that Usopp and Nami find themselves in the bathhouse of Onigashima. Now, most of you probably know this, but in old Japan, people used to bathe publicly in big bathhouses where they were all bathed together, because most people could not afford to have their own personal baths. In today's day and age in Japan, most people do bath privately in their own homes, but you might be surprised that actually a lot of people still really like to bathe publicly, and public baths are still found very commonly across all of Japan. So with Onigashima based so much on Japanese culture, it makes sense that it would have a general bath where all the members of the Beast Pirates could clean themselves. The Beast Pirates may be pirates, they may be barbars, but they're not filthy. The next reference lies in Yamato's attack. His attack is called Nari Kabura. Now, Nari Kabura basically translates to ringing kabura, but what a kabura is actually a type of arrow from Japan, or more specifically of Asian origin, that is an arrow that has a piece of wood at the end that has been carved in a specific way to be in the shape of something like a whistle, or actually it would be more accurate to compare it to an ocarina. So when this arrow is fired, it makes a very specific sound because the wind goes through this whistle at the tip of the arrow and causes a specific noise. This can be used in battle to alert other troops or to direct them towards a specific direction because it creates this sound that travels in one specific direction. So in this case, Yamato's attack is basically like an arrow. It's this powerful blast that goes directly and hits Hacha, so perhaps that's why it's considered like a ringing arrow, because it makes this big noise and just clashes against Hacha's head. However, my friend and fellow translator Ed and Bobby actually pointed out a reference that I think could be connected to this, where she mentioned that Modu, the founder of the Xiongnu Empire, which is located in modern Mongolia, once famously killed his father by firing a kabura arrow towards him and ordering his subordinates to also fire at his father. This was how he took power and was able to found the empire. So Eden was considering that perhaps this could be connected to Yamato's desire to want to kill his father, to want to kill Kaido, and so this could perhaps be a reference to this. It is a bit of a stretch, so it might just be a coincidence, it might not be the case, but I still thought it was something worth mentioning. Also, by the way, while we're talking about Hacha, you can actually see the daiji for the number 8 tattooed on his side. Now, a daiji is a Japanese character for numbers. It's a different way to write numbers in Japanese. There is an ancient way to write these daiji, and this is the one that we see used on Hacha and also the other members of the numbers, which makes sense because they are, after all, ancient giants, and they are lab experiments, so it makes sense that they are numbered. In fact, Hacha's own name is a combination of the kanji for 8 and T, making the name literally translate to 8 T's because he is the number 8 of the numbers, as you may be able to discern by the fact that his glasses are shaped in the form of the number 8. Oh, and by the way, when Yamato falls in the hole, Frankie says, "Super makasetoke," This line, which translates to "super leave it to me," is one of Frankie's trademark lines, which he has mentioned quite a few times in the series, and he is bringing back once again. Then we move on to the scene with Law, where he enters the basement of Kaido's castle and finds out that the poneglyph there is not a red poneglyph, but simply a normal blue poneglyph. In this scene, above the poneglyph, you can see a very large rope attached from the ceiling. This is actually a shimenawa, a rope that can often be found in Japanese temples as a way to protect the temple and ward it off from evil spirits. So it being present here above the poneglyph is sort of giving the poneglyph an almost sacred aura, like it's some sort of sacred object, which is a really cool detail. However, what he mentions is quite interesting. He says that he basically talks to Corazon by saying, "Hey, Corazon, I've really decided, that I've made up my mind. I've decided that I want to know about the meaning of this checkered fate." Now, the interesting term is this term of checkered fate. The importance of this term is because Sengoku actually mentioned this all the way back in Dressrosa in chapter 798, when Law was talking with Sengoku and was asking him about the will of D and just what exactly is the D clan, what is the will of D. Sengoku decided not to tell him, but he thought in his inner thoughts that the D always follow a checkered fate, the same term that is being used here. So it's kind of interesting that Law is bringing up this term again. It's particularly interesting since Sengoku never told it to Law, he only thought about it in his thoughts, so I wonder where Law exactly got this term. And this leads us to the final reference of this chapter, the scene that confused everybody. Sanji hears through his observation haki a certain dialogue happening upstairs on the 3rd floor of the castle. Now, a lot of people seem to have mistaken this with Ivankov. I can sort of understand why, because the laughter that is used here, which is nufufu in Japanese, is sort of similar to Ivankov's laugh. And the scene that is being played out sort of sounds like Ivankov's trademark gag. However, let me reassure you that is not actually what is happening, because this is a very clear reference to something from Japanese theater. It is a specific gag from Japanese theater that is known as obimawashi. Obimawashi is basically this gag/performance from Japanese theater where a man grabs a woman by her obi, the obi being the sash that keeps a kimono together, and if it is removed, usually the kimono falls apart, leaving a woman naked, and pulling from this obi slowly, making the lady spin around and basically disrobing her. The way this gag is played out, the man says, "Yoi de wa nai ka?" Or, "Isn't it fine?" Yo, it's fine, I can do this, right? As he begins to unrobe the lady, and the lady's like, "Oh no, you mustn't, ah!" She begins to spin around because she's being pulled by her obi. This is something that has its origins in Japanese theater, but has also expanded to Japanese comedy and even some anime, so you might have seen this featured in some anime before. Obimawashi is usually performed by a lord or a high-ranking person, usually someone with evil intent or who is depicted as a sort of bad guy, and this lord is basically disrobing this woman to obviously leave her naked, though usually the implications of these is that it's some sort of roleplay between the two and that the lady is playing along. So, in this case, Sanji is quite literally hearing a woman being disrobed, and from his perspective, it almost sounds like the woman is being disrobed against her will, though he may not be aware that this is being played off as some sort of roleplay and that the woman might be playing along. Who this woman is, we can't really tell, but my best guess would be someone like Black Maria or perhaps one of the courtesans that was with her. The reason why is because we saw that Black Maria didn't really participate in the fights. Even though she is aware of everything that's been going on, she's basically just been going at her own pace. Either way, this is going to be leading to some developments next chapter, probably with Sanji back to his own shenanigans again. But let me reassure you, this is not Ivankov, this is not anyone else, this is simply a very specific cultural reference that might be easily lost to those who are not familiar with Japanese culture. So that's all the Japanese references featured in this chapter. I hope this was helpful to you. I hope this helped you understand a little bit more some of the things that were mentioned in this chapter. And if you're interested in this type of thing, then let me know, because I might bring it up again for future chapters. Anyways, thanks for watching.
良いではないか。
お代官様、お代官様。
もう逃げなくても良いではないか。
お許しを、お許しを。
わしを手こずらせよって。
あれ